the PowerPoint is based on the supervisor of assessments provided this, and I want to just acknowledge that because I wanted it to be appropriate for Kendall County. So the basic tenet of your tax bill, because that's what you see the bottom line, is based on a really simple formula. Your assessed value, what is your assessed value of your property? And then we want to look at your exemptions, and you take off those exemptions if you have any. Most of you, 100% of you probably should have a homeowner's exemption, if nothing else. Some of you, because of your age, would have a senior's exemption. Because of an income base, you might get a senior freeze. There are other exemptions we'll talk about later. But okay, so you have an assessed value, a starting number, minus any exemptions that you qualify for. And then you multiply that by the tax rate. Tax rate is determined by the different taxing bodies within your area. Libraries, schools, fire protection districts, those kinds of, all of those taxing bodies make up a combined tax rate, and that equals your tax bill. It's pretty straightforward. It's not complicated in that sense. It's pretty straightforward. And in the brochure, just a reminder, it's just along the top here. So if you forget, you can refer back to this and go, okay, now how do they come up with my tax bill? Very simple. Your assessed value, your exemptions, multiplied by the tax rate, equal the tax bill. So how do we impact and help you save money on your bottom line? The first thing we need to do is, let's do the assessment. Well, I'll put that up there. First thing is your assessment. The cycle, just the standard cycle here by January 1st, there's a list of taxable properties that are prepared by the clerk, the township assessors by November 15th. Property is valued as of that January 1st. You can read this. The supervisor of assessments is the person who handles the exemptions. If you want to do an appeal, it's always 30 days after the publication. If the assessed valuations in your area are not at 33 1/3%, now let me back up. The Illinois Constitution mandates that every piece of property in Illinois is assessed at 1/3 of its market value. So that means from the Wisconsin border to Kentucky, every piece of property in Illinois, residential property, is supposed to be assessed at 33 1/3%, 1/3. If for some reason a certain area is overassessed or underassessed, then there's what's called a state equalization factor that's added that you might see to correct it so that it's at 1/3. There's also the Board of Review can do a calculation to help make that standard. The assessed values are then certified by the clerk by March 15th, and then tax bills are mailed on or before May 1 and due in 2 payments this year. It's June and September. So that's the assessment cycle. So an assessment basically is deciding what your property relative to the other properties, what your share of the tax burden should be. So you want to look at, over here, yeah, I just did this, okay. Township assessor calculates the market value using sales data from the prior 3 years. So a lot of you may have a home that you bought last year, and you're saying, well, I bought it for this, and 1/3 of its value is, if I bought it for $100,000, 1/3 should be $33,333. That should be its assessed value. But it's assessed higher, or maybe it's assessed lower. Well, that may be a result of the requirement that they look at the last 3 years. And so what misses our logic is that if there's a 3-year cycle, if the value of the homes 7 years ago were ramped up and they were on this upswing, but as they were on the upswing, your tax bills were lagging behind because they were looking at the 3 years before that upswing. And then when the upswing started to go down, the market was going down, that wave, your tax bills were reflecting the prior 3 years when they were higher, and then you're thinking, well, my value went down, why are my taxes still up? That's because there's that 3-year cycle that they have to look at sales ratios and markets so that it's a 3-year average. And so that's one thing that you have to wrap your mind around, is that it's not a real time. Oh I bought my house for $100,000 now, it should be at $33,333. No, the area was assessed over a 3-year period, and it's coming down off of that. So then when the market starts to go back up, there'll be a lag, and your tax bill will be lower, but yet your assessed value will be higher, and you're like, wow, I'm not having, my value is going up, but my taxes are still low. But again, it's that cycle, 3-year cycle, that you have to get wrapped around, and that the assessors have to do. That's what they're required to do, is to look at a 3-year average. And so, so the assessed valuation is where you want to start in terms of lowering your bottom line tax bill. Are you assessed fairly? Are you assessed the same as the other houses in your neighborhood code? A 1,000 square foot home compared to other 1,000 square foot homes. Are you assessed at $40,000 and they're assessed at $32,000 and $34,000 and $33,000? Well, then you can make appeals. You have the right as a homeowner. There's basically 3 levels of appeals: the local level with the assessor's level, a board of review, and then the state level PTAB, Property Tax Appeal Board. So you want to make sure that your assessed valuation is at its lowest possible starting point. And again, you work with your local assessors. Your local assessors are your point people who know the area. They know that area better than anybody else. They understand the personality of the land for that particular township. So you want to use them, utilize them, because that's what they're there for. They can help you figure out, oh, are you really assessed at a fair level? Or are you overassessed? Is some reason are you out of whack? And they can help correct that. If for some reason you've gone that level and you still feel like you're overassessed, there's a board of review, which is you have a right to go to. Now, most people that I work with do an appeal on their own. They don't need to, but you can hire a lawyer. There are lawyers that do that kind of thing. I think that with the help of your local assessors and the board of review and the county people, I think they're pretty easy to work with from my experience. I don't think you need to hire a lawyer, but you have the right to do that. So, equalization. Oh, I'm behind on the slide. So you determine current sewer median levels. There's sales ratio study. Again, the median level to the prior 2 median levels, 3-year average, 33 1/3%. So most of you probably have seen one of these, unless you're brand new and you haven't gotten one yet. But this is an assessment notice. You can see that it'll have the property PIN number or parcel number. That's important to know, particularly if you're paying your tax bills. When you pay your tax bills and you write the check, make sure you put your PIN number on it, because if you're 1 digit off, you're paying somebody else's taxes. So you want to make sure that your PIN number is accurate on your information. It'll have the publication dates, final filing dates. This will have all of your information that you'll want to know about your property. An assessment appeal process. You have 30 days from the date of publication of the assessment roll for the township. You know what I don't know is when that 30 days starts here in Kendall County. I don't have that in mind. I'm not sure when that starts. The most common basis for an appeal are uniformity. I started talking about that, your market value. There's a hearing scheduled before the County Board of Review. You can request to have the Board of Review review the evidence without appearing at a hearing. You pull together your evidence. It's a calculation. They look at your 4, 5, or 6 comparables or comparables. Thank you. I have both pronunciations in my brain, and it stalls my brain sometimes. So comparables or comparables. The appellant may file with the Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board if the local Board of Review, if you don't like that decision, that's your 3rd level. Now, one thing I like to talk about in terms of appeals, I always get somebody, particularly in a group this size, that will say, well, I don't like my taxes that high, but I really don't want to appeal because I feel bad. I really want the schools to get their money. And if I appeal and I'm paying less, well, let me just put you at rest. When you make an appeal at the local level to correct the assessment level, or even at the Board of Review level, at those two levels, you're not going to hurt the taxing bodies that you want to make sure that you've got good services from, the fire protection districts, the schools, the libraries, etc. Because what you're doing is you're shifting by the assessment shift and or the exemptions. You're just changing the size, the slice of the pie that you're obligated to contribute to the overall budget. And so you're not going to hurt those taxing bodies by appealing and getting a reduction. It's just going to shift. You know, if everybody in this room had an equal amount and yours is lowered, that means if it's lowered by $2, then the other 100 people have to pay 2 cents more, all things being equal. If 4 of you get reduced, then it's shifted to the other. So all you're doing is shifting, but all the money amount is still the same and still goes to those entities, schools, libraries, fire protection districts, etc. So at those levels, it's not a big deal. But once you get to the Property Tax Appeal Board at the state level, because of the timing of it, by the time it gets to that level and the volume of appeals that they deal with, if there's a decision at the Property Tax Appeal Board, PTAB, and they say, oh, you do deserve a reduction. Now they have to go back because of the time lag and to each one of those taxing bodies and say, well, Mrs. Smith, I don't know what your name is. Mrs. Smith.
I've been called horse.
What's that?
I've been called horse.
Oh yeah, I have too. Mrs. Smith was overassessed. She was overtaxed. She deserves a reduction of, let's say, $1,000. So then what they have to do is go back to all of those taxing bodies and say, well, your portion of that $1,000 that this taxpayer overpaid, that she needs to get a refund for because she overpaid, you need to give back that money. So let's say the library got $2.95 of that $1,000. That taxing body has to come up with that $2.95 to give back to the taxpayer. The schools that got $47 of that $1,000, whatever, they have to come up with that money to give back to the taxpayer. So just imagine multiplying that process by all of the taxpayers and all of the taxing bodies. So by that point, there are dollars, real dollars, that have to go back, have to come out of those budgets because they have to go back to the taxpayers who were overtaxed, because you have the right to that refund. Okay? So I always encourage homeowners, absolutely appeal with your local assessors and your Board of Review. Get it done really early, really fast, so that you don't have to worry about if you're one of those homeowners who says, oh, I just don't want to take money away from this. We'll do it at these levels because that just shifts the burden around a little bit. Okay, that's sort of the gestalt, the overall of the bigger picture, macro view of it. So the assessment process, you want to make sure is done correctly. You want to be assessed fairly. It's about fairness. Are you assessed fairly? Are you assessed at $30,000 just like the other homes in your neighborhood at $30,000? But if you go through and you look at it and you compare to other homes, what if you're lower? Well, I always advise homeowners, well, if you're the low person in the neighborhood, well, they don't have a basis for an appeal, don't appeal them. And you go on. Okay, so that's the, you know what I don't have a slide in here on is what I forgot to talk about first. Okay, so you do the assessment. Once you feel that you are assessed at the proper level, your home is assessed fairly, just like all the other 3-bedroom homes in your neighborhood. The next part of the equation that we like to encourage you to try and impact is your exemptions. If you live in your home on January 1st of a given year of the tax year, you are entitled to a homeowner's exemption. That's it. That's what the law says. I don't care where you live. You need to live in a house half of the year, it has to be your main residence. I mean, some people may own 2 or 3 or 4 properties, but it has to be your main residence. But if you live in the house on January 1st of the given year, you're entitled to homeowner's exemption. If you are 65 or older, doesn't matter if it's the husband or the wife, doesn't matter, whichever one turns 65 first. My mom turned 65 last year, or not last year, well, 5 years ago. She turned 65 first, my dad was still 64. They still got the senior exemption. My dad said, I married an older woman, look what it got me. An extra year of an exemption. I said, I know, Dad. So it doesn't matter which one turns 65 first, but as soon as you turn 65, then you are qualified for a senior exemption. Are you getting that? Was it listed on your tax bill? If not, you can go back.
Is that automatic, or do you have to roll?
You need to apply for it first. It should be automatic after that. I'm sorry? Oh, you apply for it every year here? Okay. 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 Well, we have been advocating to change the law so that once you turn 65, you don't get any younger, as far as I know. But what happens is, oh yes.
I think that just the regular senior exemption, you don't have to do every year.
Right.
Senior freeze.
Right. Okay.
That's
Good.
done every year.
Okay. Good. Okay. Good. Well, I thought once you have the senior exemption, it's an automatic. It's the senior freeze that's based on your income that you have to apply for every year, because just because you're 65 or 66 or 67 and you're under that 60, is it 55 now? 55,000 a year? 50. Is it 50? 55. You may be under that amount this year, but what happens if you have a son, he was away at college, he graduated, he came back, he's in the process of maybe getting married or finding a job, but he's living with you and he's working an odd job. The total household income shifts. Now it's not just your income, but it's your son or daughter's income, because they're now living there, is calculated into the total household income. Now you're over the 55 and you do not qualify for the senior freeze. Now you're still senior and you're still a homeowner, so you still get those two. But now you don't. But now, Mark, $1 reduction. I think I have a slide up. Now, then a couple years ago, they voted to extend it for a 2-year. So the first 2 years you're back from active duty in a theater or war, then it's something that you would qualify. Okay, so you want to make sure your exemptions, that you're receiving every exemption that you're entitled to. If you feel that you did not receive an exemption that you're entitled to, your local assessors is where I would start. The supervisor of assessments, as you call in the chart, handles that. But talk with your local assessors, because I imagine if you've got an exemption issue, you also are probably going to ask them, am I assessed the same as all the other houses like mine in the neighborhood? So I would start with your local assessor. They're very helpful. And then go to the supervisor of assessments if for some reason, but make sure that your assessed valuation is at its lowest rate. Make sure that your exemptions, that you're receiving all of your exemptions. Okay? Those are the 2 areas that you can really impact your bottom line tax dollar. Yes.
I have a quick question. Okay, this is for my mom. She's a senior. Last year's taxes had the senior exemption on it, so she's got to reapply. Is it too late to reapply for this year's?
Yeah, if she got the senior exemption last year, she doesn't have to reapply for the senior exemption. It's the senior freeze.
Okay, it's
based
senior
on.
exemption wasn't applied to it.
Oh, it's not showing up on the tax bill?
On the new tax bill, it's not showing up.
Okay, so then what you would do is work with your local assessor to say, and what you'll need to get is what we call a C of E, a certificate of error. It certifies that there was an error on the tax bill, that it didn't apply what she's entitled to. And so after the C of E is agreed to, that they're like, oh, you're right, she didn't get any younger and she's still living there and she's still the taxpayer of record. Oh, wow. Well, and those things happen. With the volume of properties out there and the sometimes there's a computer glitch. I mean, let's be honest. We depend on computers to run spaceships and all kinds of things. Sometimes, for some reason, they get dropped off. But many times, those exemptions get dropped off when the property changes hands. So, let's say my parents decided to sell their house to me, which is not an arm's length transaction, but let's say they did. I would not qualify for the homeowner's exemption or the senior exemption because I bought it in June. and I didn't live there on January 1st. So I wouldn't get those 2 exemptions the first year. They would drop off. So then the next year I'd have to reapply for the homeowners because I didn't qualify for them before. And so that's what this case is. Yeah, so just work with them and they can do a certificate of error and correct that. All right? Yes, ma'am.
Just let you know, Kendall County does send out a form every spring for the people in this area, and that's for the senior exemption.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot of technicalities in that because I lost mine one year because you have to have that back to them by a certain date. If you don't have it back by that date, you don't get it.
Okay.
And they're not necessarily
Senior exemption has to be every year.
I thought the senior exemption was automatic.
No, it's not.
Senior exempt is what the paper.
Is it possible that different townships work differently?
Yes.
Every county might work differently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I knew that. That's.
I fill it out every year, and second exemption.
I'm sorry. What?
I fill it out every year, second exemption.
I see.
We're over 65. The first one we automatically get for them is the home.
Yeah.
But the second one you got to fill out every year.
Okay. All right.
I was told that you have to fill it in every year. It's required because they want to verify that you're still in that home and it isn't the overage. Obviously, you're not going to get younger.
Right.
But the possibility that you moved or something and
Okay.
it gets goofed
I
up.
see.
So
Okay,
they said
so-
every year so far.
Maybe that's why you
All right.
fill it out every year. But I fill it out every
Yeah.
year.
So every county is different, but if there's an annual mailing to reconfirm that you are there, that you're the person that lives there, you're the senior, and to reconfirm that exemption, then just fill it out and send it back in. Make sure it's automatic. Yes, ma'am.
I just got here, maybe you've already discussed it, but I'm a senior assistant free. I got a 0 this year, and I called the office and asked why they got it for mayor. And she said, because the value of your house went down. I guess I don't understand it.
Yeah, that I don't.
What could have happened was her house was assessed at a value, and for years when she got the freeze, it was above that value, and the amount of the exemption was whatever that amount was over the initial.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, now eventually, her actual assessment has gotten lower than that.
Oh, I see.
Her assessment now is, I'm just guessing, her assessment now
Yeah.
is lower than what it was initially frozen at.
Right. So.
I just went through this with my mother-in-law. I helped her too because the value of your home is lower than what you paid for it when they started the freeze. And this
Yes.
exemption is just for depreciation, protecting senior citizens. So now it goes back to the value. So your neighbors, now this was her situation, had, they had a reduction of like $600 because her value, all of them in the neighborhood went down 17%. And, but her tax bill went up $177.
Mine went up 1,000.
No, I understand that, but I went back and read the form, the state form, but it's because of the depreciation of the house and over that level of where it started.
So you mean I will never get it?
Yeah, now you're at a lower, now you're at a lower value. It's not every year, now you're at a lower value, so the house will go up again, you get more.
Seniors, because I have interned
Right.
through there. I
Right.
just,
Yeah,
I go over and I can go to help them.
Yeah, that's why I was for another one.
Great, thank you very much, I appreciate it. Now, see, there's a lot of knowledge in this room, better than mine. Okay, let's talk about the tax rate. So remember, this is very simple. Your assessed valuation minus your exemptions multiplied by a tax rate. So how do they come up with a tax rate? Local taxing bodies submit their levy requests to the county clerk's office. That means the libraries, the schools, the fire protection district, all those different taxing bodies, there are some special areas, some special assessment levels. They submit their levy requests. That means what do they want to spend for the next year? Do they want to spend $100,000 to buy new books for the library and computers and whatever? Do they want to spend $1 million with the school to pay teachers good salaries, to buy books, to repay, I served on the school board, we repaid the parking lot for the kids at the high school one year. So whatever it is that the taxing body wants to spend, they submit their levy request to the county clerk's office. the property tax extension limitation law limits the levy increase to the lesser of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or 5%. So now you divide the levy by the total equalized assessed value, EAV, and that equals your tax rate. So you've got an AV, an assessment valuation, and then you have an EAV. The EAV is that number once the multiplier is applied to the area, to the tax, to the assessments. So that's how you get your tax rate. So you add the applicable tax rates for the taxing districts to obtain the total tax rate for your area.
How do you get the EAV?
The EAV is the equalized assessed valuation. So if the local Kendall County area, well, actually it's done by township. If your particular township is assessed at a certain level, but yet it's assessed too low, let's say over, looking at all of them, they're just a bit lower than, puts it at 33 1/3%, which is mandated by the Illinois Constitution. It's not mandated by your local assessor or your local, the Constitution mandates that every property be assessed at 33 1/3%. So if it's, let's say it's assessed at 31%, there has to be an equalizing factor added to that calculation to get it to the 33 1/3. So that's where you come up with the EAV, the equalized assessed valuation. And so that's the number that they use to come up with the tax.
What's the levy?
Again, a levy is when a taxing body wants to spend money. So we're in a library. Every year the library board gets together and they say, we need to buy 3 more computers because of technology and people are using computers, but we also want to buy 5,000 books over the year. And that cost is going to be $10,000. So they levy a $10,000 request for their budget for that year. Every taxing body has a levy. Every year they have a budget of money that they want to spend. So the taxing bodies, they submit their levy requests to the county clerk. Yes, sir.
Okay. I've lost you totally.
I'm right here.
Because I've got my tax bill in front of me. What would be more easy for me to understand, because apparently your taxes could go up 10%, but they'll still fall within this lesser of 5%. Okay? Now, you say levy. Does that mean when, let's take for example the school district.
Okay.
The difference is now when you say levy, is that the rate?
No, that's the actual amount.
Now, this is where I'm losing you, because the school district last year had a rate of 5.9 on my tax bill.
Yeah.
This year it's 6.7.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Okay.
How does their tax rate change?
Well, the tax rate changes because they've asked for. There's a couple of variables. Let's say they've asked for $1 million to spend $1 million.
Well, I understand they want to ask for a certain amount of money.
And so the tax rate is determined by the number of properties in the school district's area. Now, school districts aren't exactly according to the township border lines or the county border lines. So sometimes your taxing district goes over into another county, it goes into another county. Okay. So, but whatever that district is, the number of properties that are taxable properties, remember there are some that are non-taxable properties like churches and others that are not on the tax rolls. And so the properties that are on the tax rolls, let's say there's 100 of them, you have to divide that $1 million by the 100 to come up with what's the tax rate to get that $1 million for that particular taxing body. And in this case, the $1 million 1 year, they may be spending the exact same amount from year to year, but because there might be more or less houses or business or taxable properties. Because remember, there's not just homes; there's also businesses that are taxed. It's taxable.
So you're saying the school district could have grown?
It could have grown.
It could have shrunk.
Or it could have shrunk. It could be. That's just one variable. If everything else stays the same, and they're asking for the exact same $1 million year after year after year, it still could change if the number of properties that are taxable change.
What about foreclosures? How does foreclosures?
Yeah, foreclosures. I would say, I'm not sure if the foreclosures come off of the books until they go back on, until after they go back onto the tax rolls. Is that what happens? No.
The only thing I've done with foreclosures is if there's damage to the house.
Okay.
You can lower it for 1 year.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's not technically a market sale.
Okay. That one stays on. I was just, hang on just a second. Let me just add this. I didn't add it earlier. In terms of the market sales, you have to make sure that it's an arm's length transaction. I sort of alluded to this earlier. If my parents sold me the house, they're probably going to sell it to me less than what the market is because they want their son to keep the house in the family. So so that's not considered an arm's length open market transaction. So those numbers, those exchanges, those sales are not used in the calculation of the sales ratio studies. So if half of your county is passing on their property to sons and daughters and nieces and nephews and cousins, whatever, that's great. It's just that those numbers, those sales and those transactions aren't used in the calculation of the open market value of things. So anyway.
If the tax levy increase is supposed to be capped at 5%, how come, like on mine, my school rate last year was 5.9, this year it's 6.7? That's much more than 5%.
Well, that's a 5% change in the tax rate. That's not a change in the levy. Their levy may have only gone from $1 million to $1,500,000. No, $1,050,000.
They can't ask for more.
Yeah. Yeah, they can't ask for more in the levy. That doesn't mean that your tax rate isn't going to go up more than 5%. That's because remember the tax rates, the levy you divide it by the levy and by the total EAV. And the total equalized assessed valuation of an area may go up or down based on a variety of factors. So yeah, they're not the same. The levy is not the same as the tax rate. The levy is the raw dollar amount. What does this taxing body want to spend? Does the fire department need a new fire truck to put out fires? A fire truck is $4 million. So they levy for $4 million for next year because they want a new fire truck. That's maybe more than the $1 million that they asked for last year when they were just buying hoses and putting filters on drainages or whatever it is that they do. But that's obviously more than a 5% increase from the last year's levy. But the tax rate can't go up more than the CPI or 5%.
Sure seems like a lot of levying's been going on, huh? My taxes, just if I can make a point, my taxes in 14 years have gone up 350%. Although the value of my home, even at the high point, never doubled. My wages certainly haven't gone up that much. Inflation hasn't gone up that much. And my services have not changed one iota. So maybe this really should be directed, I'm not angry, but it sounds like it, but this maybe should be directed more to our representatives. How can this be allowed?
Well, you mean the state representatives? No, you mean the taxing body representatives?
Well, I guess, and the state representatives, make the laws that impact us.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, it seems like these things are just running rampant. How can all these things be changing to such a degree when our incomes are not changing, our values aren't changing to that degree? All this stuff is running way past where we're at.
Okay, it's a good point. Again, I just want to reiterate what the representatives mentioned earlier. This program is about empowering you to understand the system, to know how it works, to know what your rights are, to appeal, how that works, and so it's not to really lay blame, but I'm going to answer your question very honestly. The issue, that's the third part of the calculation, the levy part that you're bringing up, that you as taxpayers have the right, every December, usually it's the first week of December, every taxing body has to have a levy hearing. They have to have a hearing about what they want to levy, what they want to spend for the next year. And you have the right to go to those meetings and say, you know what, I love teachers, I want my kid to have a good school, but can't you keep the budget this level? Do you have to build a new swimming pool? Do you have to do whatever? And so that's your opportunity to go to those taxing bodies and say, this is my opinion. Can you do more for less? I served on a school board. I was drafted to run for my school board because I worked in property tax stuff, and all my little old neighbor ladies that were on fixed incomes knew me from helping them with their assessments and getting their exemptions. And they came to me and they said, Mark, you're the only person in the neighborhood who understands that we can't spend anymore. You have to run for the school board. I said, I do not want to run for the school board. You have to run. So the bottom line was, I let them put my name on the ballot. I thought I would never win. I won. There were 6 and me. There were 7 of us on the board. 6 versus 1. I couldn't even get a second on a motion because I was that radical, anti-tax Republican. It doesn't matter what I don't care what your party is, but I'm a Republican. And here I was and all these little ladies were all Democrat ladies, but they wanted me on the board because they couldn't spend anymore. That's how I got involved. So I made the case year after year. Can we spend this? Can we spend less here? Can we do that? And that's how I got involved. My advice to you is, none of us hate schools. We don't hate libraries. We want fire protection districts to have fire trucks. We want all that stuff. But you got to get involved at that level to say, hey, can you spend less? The economy we just can't do it. In terms of the state, our state representatives that represent your area, I've worked with these women for at least 4 years now. They're wonderful. They will listen to any suggestions. Most of the legislation that they pass and vote for, you can go online and look at their voting record. You can ask them. They'll be up front. Are more legislation about empowerment legislation that allow things to, they vote on exemptions. They established the returning veterans exemption. 2 years ago, they voted to expand it to 2 years coming back. So that's more where they get involved with it. If you want to change the Illinois Constitution, that's a whole other matter. If you want to change the system to an every year annual assessment process as opposed to a 3-year averaging, that's another. Other states use that annual process. Some places they reassess every time their property is sold process. There's different kinds of assessing processes, but those are bigger questions that you have to look at that are going to impact all these school districts and fire protection districts and libraries. And if you change that system, that's a huge shift. What we're trying to do is just empower you to know what the system is here. How do you best impact your bottom line tax bill? How do I get my tax bill from $1,500 to $1,000? And we're trying to say to you, when you walk away from here today, you may not like everything that we've had to say, but you will know that you, the taxpayers, have rights. There is a process. It's free to homeowners to make an appeal. You don't have to go out and hire an attorney. You can if you want. If you're an attorney, I'm not trying to badmouth attorneys, but you don't need an attorney to make an appeal, to work with your local assessors. They're approachable. In this brochure, this one little brochure has their names and their phone numbers. Some of them have emails, some of them have websites, web addresses. There's no reason you shouldn't work with your local assessors to make sure that your assessed valuation is at its lowest, fairest level, and that you're receiving every exemption that you're entitled to. And if you didn't get one, they will help you do a certificate of error to get that back. And then the tax levy, the multiplication of the tax rate, you can impact that by going to different taxing bodies with their meetings and saying, I love teachers, but you can't keep spending this. Or, I like fire trucks, they're pretty red, but do you have to have 8? Can you do it with 7? Or, make your argument. I'm not saying that you're going to win necessarily, but at least show up and engage in that process. Yes?
Just a couple things. I served on a high school board for 4 years, and the thing that frustrated me the most was they started this levy process with a budget, and they said, we had board members that say, well, we can get 5% more, let's just make the budget 5% more, knowing that we can get that, and we'll figure out what we're going to spend it on later. Now, the other point I was going to make here, we just had a consolidated election, and I think
vote.
turnout and voting we've ever had in the county. And those are the people that were elected this past April that make all these spending decisions that we're arguing about.
Right. That's very, thank you very much. It's very appropriate, yes.
So, on these levies, when these meetings are taking place, how are we as homeowners, how do we know about them? Do we have to go to the fire department, to the school, do we have to go to each of these meetings, and how do we know when they are?
They have to publish that they're going to have a meeting.
Do we
Yeah.
have to go to each of them?
Yeah.
So,
Yes, you do. You have to go to the separate meetings. Now, where I live in another town, outside of Kendall County, way up there in that monster land, the city that I live in, the fire budget and the library budget, in this instance, both fall under the city budget. So I can go to one meeting, the city council meeting, where they do the city budget, and I can argue that particular line item about the library. What are you doing spending money on books? Nobody reads books anymore. They read iPads. And so if your budget includes, so I can go to those, I can go to one meeting and actually cover a couple different things. But yes, when the school board meets, I go to the Main Township School, High School Board, wherever I live. And I can sit there, and when the budget comes up, I can stand up in the public sector of the meeting and say, I'm Mark Decker, and I live at 1266 East Washington. And you know what? I'm a former teacher, and I serve on the school board, and I think that your budget is out of whack. You're not, and I can make my case. You don't need to spend $100,000 on repainting the parking lot for the high school kids, because that lot, it's just a lot. Spend that other $100,000 here, or don't spend it this year. Wait for 2 years till the economy gets better, because my house, I can't afford more taxes. I can make the argument. Yes, sir.
I want to comment on that for people so they understand how it works. The school districts always do their levy in December, but it'll be published usually in the papers the first week of December, so you can look at it, get the information, so when you go to the meeting, you're not just like throwing stuff out. You will have numbers in front of you, and the meeting is typically in the middle of December to board meeting, and if they start, like hypothetically, board meetings, let's say start at 7, they have a levy hearing like at 6:30, 30 minutes before, and that's when you can get up and make comments. But look at the stuff that will be in the paper like the first week in December, because there's a specific amount of days, like between 7 and 11 days before that board meeting, that you have to publish all that stuff and have it in detail, so you can look at that and kind of have some questions before you go to the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you
Are
very
they
much.
supposed to be posting those online now? A lot of the counties are posting
Yeah.
their budgets on TV online. Is
Yeah.
Kendall County posting them online?
I don't know if they are or not. Do you know if Kendall County posts?
I don't think online is actually required yet. It's just by some kind of mass media way,
Yeah.
depending on the
Yeah.
population in the district.
Yeah. No, it's not mandatory, but
Why would you want to make your levy so public so people can criticize your Scott?
that's one perspective. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, one of the problems is because it's like a catch-22 for the taxing districts too, because they don't get the full amount that they are levying for actually, because the amount that they are levying and giving to the county, it's being reduced by all the decisions from the previous year that they are actually, with board of review and PTA makes
Sure.
decisions,
Right.
and so therefore that lessens their request for money.
Sure.
So they feel compelled to ask for the maximum allowable amount to, because they know they're not going to end up with that amount, and so that's a catch-22 that keeps them going, and
Yeah.
that's going to be something that needs to be addressed
Sure.
or could be addressed, through laws of the state level.
Well, that's a good point. Remember I mentioned earlier that if you appeal at that PTAD level and you were overassessed and overtaxed, you have a you have the right to be reimbursed for the overtaxation, and that money comes back out of those taxing bodies. And so the point is that's why they're levying those higher amounts, because they're anticipating that somebody's going to get a refund for, not just from the last year, but PTAB is like 4 or 5 years behind because of the volume of all the cases that they've had. And the board of review, the PTAB office that was up in the suburbs in the town that I live in that supposed to cover the northern, was shut down under the last governor's administration, the office was there, but there was no money funded to even turn on the lights or a phone number. So all of those appeals from the Cook County and the collar counties and all of Illinois now go to one little office, which actually is right next door to where my office is in Springfield when I'm there. That PTAP office, they have boxes and boxes of files in the hallway. They don't have any room to file all those complaints. And so they're so behind. So that's a good point. That, you know, that's why they're levying these higher amounts. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about finding comparables.
Oh, yeah.
Do they just look at, like, we have a rental that's like 1,200 square feet. Do they only look at other 3-bedroom 1,200 square feet? So do they look at the fact that it's a prefab Wausau home that doesn't necessarily have the same value as a brick, you know, ranch? Do they look at the manufacturing of it, or just that it sits on the same square footage?
I don't know. That's a good question. Do they are all? I know that brick versus non-brick generally tend to be assessed overall about the same, but there are differences.
I can't find comparables. I don't, you know, if anybody can tell me where there's 3 other Wausau homes out in the country, I'd be happy to look at them.
Yeah, I don't know. What would you suggest on finding comparables?
Well, our board of review likes to have the comparables in your township.
In the township.
I use a spreadsheet that I have that give me 3 properties. I'll compare those 3 properties to your subject property.
So how can I
no matter-
give you 3 properties if there aren't 3 comparables? That's the question.
Well, there, you could, if there absolutely isn't any more, then they'll go outside the township.
Yeah, they'll make exceptions.
But there's also a way that you can compare from tables the value of the Wausau to a regular built house. So the regular built house, the subject property has comparables, and you either add or subtract whatever the difference is that comparable has.
So do you just have to look on the tax rolls and look for other 1,100, 1,200 square foot homes?
That would be a place to start.
Good question. Yeah, yes, sir.
I think her question goes to very first part of the equation, the assessment process by the assessor. Where do you find objective criteria? What is the objective criteria, first off, and where do you find it for these individuals to make that assessment?
Well,
I've never been, in 14 years, I've never been given, this is the way to go.
Are the properties online yet in Kendall County?
Yes.
We're getting there.
Yeah, you're getting, okay, so you're getting there. So I'm used to another county that everything is online, and I can go through and pick here, pick there, whatever. But yeah, they're going online, so it'll be easier. You can just go online and you know the address of a house. You drive by and you're like, that's this. I bet the same builder built that house that built mine. So you write down the address, you get back home and you look it up.
Yeah, but that's not it's the criteria that you need to know.
Yes, is it curb appeal?
Yeah, is it curb appeal? Is it based on the builder?
Age of home.
Well,
That's where you
properties are assessed on a variety of issues. Age, the materials used, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, does it have a fireplace? All of those things go into the value estimation of a property.
But where is that? Where is that document that says? Where is that document that says 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 2-story, story and a half, brick?
Well,
age.
Yeah, that's
Department of Revenue website. They just go into their publications. They have residential publications that explains how property, the base cost.
Could you give me the chapter, paragraph, and line? Because I have 14 years been told that, and I can't find it.
But you know what? Part of it goes to market value.
Yes.
Well, that's just the start.
Yeah, that's a
Market value. So the lady said something about the law.
Wait, hang on. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
The lady who mentioned something about the Wausau home. When you go sell your house, are you going to advertise it as a Wausau home, or are you going to advertise it as a friend?
But its value right now is maybe $110,000.
When you go to
It's being
sell it,
assessed at $160,000.
when you go to sell it, some people may argue a prefab home has better quality built because they're not in the element of freezing. So again, when you go to sell it, is it a brick house, a frame house, or a Wausau home? You're probably going to say a brick or a frame. So I mean, the market value is determining
market value is about 50,000 off.
But remember that it may be off now, but you may have benefited from the fact that the market is lagging, because it's a 3-year average that they have to go on in terms of assessment. So you benefited from it when you were paying lower and that market was ramping up 7 or 8 years ago and it was heated up and it was going crazy and you're like, wow, I only paid this and my taxes are only this and it's valued at this. Should I sell? Should I not sell? And now...
But I paid 100 and now it's worth 110. But my taxes have gone up 3 times.
Okay, but again, your bottom line tax bill has at least 3 variables that we have identified. The assessed valuation, the exemptions, are you getting your exemptions? The tax rate.
No.
And so all things being equal, if just one of those issues, one of those variables changes, your taxes could go up or down based on that. Yes, yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I've gone online several times. I've appealed my taxes like 3 or 4 years ago. And I went online because I wanted to find out how the assessors assess. And I went online, and I guess it costs $200 to take the assessor's test. And that's the only way that you can find out how the assessors assess.
Well,
Is there any way I can get the literature?
sure. Your library may have it.
No, nobody has it. I can't find it anyplace. You tell me, what, do you have any old pamphlets or what, where?
Inside the brochure, let me just go back real quick. Inside your brochure, if you walk away with nothing else except this, and if we ran out, we can email you the PDF of it, and you can print it out, or send it to friends and friends. But inside here, there are important local resources. I can't stress that enough. We are partnering. We want you to utilize your local people who know your area the best. By township, there are assessors and at least a phone number under the assessor's name. So if you live in Kendall Township, there's an assessor's name is listed as phone number. There are some other areas, Bristol Township, there's a name and number. There's also an email and a website. So your resources are right. This is your best starting spot. And if you don't get a good answer, then I would go to the supervisor of assessments. That's Mr. Andy Nicoletti. And then I'm sure you'll get an answer there. If not, then obviously you can go higher. But remember, this is your cheat sheet this is light enough. We make this light enough that you can put it on your refrigerator door with a magnet. I got tons of stuff on my refrigerator. So
One of those folders back there.
I think we ran out.
Well, we don't have one.
And we have here.
You can, but here's my caveat. These are my test ones.
Thank you. I got one.
And they flipped upside down, so the inside is upside down. But it's all here. So that's why I didn't put these up. But yeah, well,
As long as we're on assessed value, 2 things. First of all, how do they calculate square footage? Is it outside?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a good question. In terms of assessment, how do they calculate square footage? Square footage is based on the footprint of the house. So if you put your foot on the ground, the footprint, you trace around your foot. That's the footprint. So you don't go in and measure your bathroom as 4 by 6, and this bedroom is 4 by 10 or 10 by 10. Or you don't go in and add them all up. You take the outside dimensions. So the outside of this house is 20 feet by 40 feet. 20 times 40 is 800. So it's 800 square feet. Now, what if you have an attached garage? How big is a standard garage? 10 by 20. So that's 200 square feet off of that. So 200 from that footprint. And that's what your total living square footage is. And then if you're a 2-story, multiply by 2. It's pretty standard.
Garage.
What's that?
Don't count garage.
A garage is not living square footage unless it's been converted and heated. In which case, it is living square footage. A basement, anything below grade, is not living square footage. Now, I'm a basement guy. I'm a big fat guy. I like the cool. I like my German Shepherd running around. I got a big screen TV. I watch college football every Saturday, and I scream at the, So I'm a basement guy. But that's not considered, and I live down there. But that's not considered living square footage in terms of assessing. Okay? Now, in addition, let's say you have a porch an enclosed porch that goes around your house. I've had a couple of cases where, porch is, maybe 5 feet out, and it goes all around the whole house. Well, that porch may be enclosed, and from the street, it may look like the house is bigger. But that's not, unless it's been enclosed and heated, that's not living square footage. So that enclosed porch is not part. So you want to make sure that the dimensions come from your plat of survey. Your plat of survey is your best evidence to say, okay, the footprint of the house is 20 by 40, which is 800 square feet. Oh, minus my 200 square foot garage, so it's 600 square feet. Oh, it's 2-story times 2. Okay. So it's pretty standard. That's
okay. Now, in my case, there's nothing anywhere near comparable because my house is weird. It's built out of telephone poles. Okay?
Okay, so you're saying that you live in a piece of artwork.
No, I don't live in these are old rotting telephone poles. Okay. But anyway, it's one bathroom, one bedroom, et cetera. I called because I thought it was way overvalued. There's nothing comparable. There's nothing built out of telephone poles.
Okay.
There's nothing around with one bedroom, one bathroom. Okay. I said, how do you calculate it? And they said they drove by and photographed it.
Okay.
Well, first of all, it's a very long, narrow house, so they saw the front view if they saw anything.
Yeah.
They didn't see the side. Second of all, it's back in the woods. You can't photograph it. It's full of trees.
What township do you live in?
I'm in Oswego Township. Okay. So anyway, I complained. They sent someone out with a camera. He walked around, took a couple photos, disappeared, and I never heard a thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a very local, specific situation. I don't know other than I would say talk to your local assessor and make the argument that just like the other discussion about brick versus frame versus Wausau, okay, there's no other comparables nearby. So the suggestion was compare it to other houses that have the same square footage. That's your beginning point.
Yeah,
because you're a very unique house.
Yeah, it's a unique house. And if you want to count artwork, are you going to count all the termites?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the same boat he is. I mean, he lives in a wooded area. I live on a farm. There is no house that's been sold in our area with the same amount of farmland. It's a little 4-acre farm. What do I compare it to when there's nothing that's comparable? And how do I know that they're assessing the land and the outbuildings correctly when I can't find out what those are? I mean, my land should not be assessed as the same thing as zoned ag as somebody who's zoned residential.
Okay. I am not an expert on farmland. I'm sort of an expert on regular house neighborhood land. So I don't want to misstate anything about the farmland. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, for it to get the lower farmland assessment, it has to be at least 5 acres.
Okay.
So if you have a 5-acre lot or less with a house on it, there's no way you can have 5 acres of farmland.
So even though it's zoned agriculture, it doesn't get.
Right.
Okay.
Even though it's zoned ag,
So are buildings on it also then assessed as a residential? So my pole barn, which is non-livable space, is.
It's assessed as an improved structure. It's not livable, but it's an improvement on the property. And your 4 acres would be assessed as residential. Now you can do that differently if you want to. You can look at maybe the acre your house is on and make that or maybe your yard you cut and that's where you kind of live. And if your other 3 acres are doing other things, an assessor can separate those other 3 acres if they want to.
Good. Thank you.
But it's got to have at least 5 acres of total farm land in order for it to get the lower farmland assessment.
But just like the gentleman that lives in the woods who can't compare a house, somebody like me, I mean, other people here who don't live necessarily in an area.
You should be able to compare the houses.
But to houses in a residential neighborhood, they have more services than I have.
There's ways that you can handle those differences when you compare.
Okay, so where do all of us find out these ways?
Your assessor should should be able to.
Yeah, your local assessor. What township are you in?
Or Andy should be able to.
Yeah, at the very, let me reiterate this. Your local assessors are in this little brochure. Their names and phone numbers at the very least. Start with them. But hang on, let me finish. But if you can't get to them, maybe they're out of town, or maybe they had a death in the family or something. You can't reach them, or you've talked to them and you don't get the answer that you think you didn't get an answer. The supervisor of assessments, Andy Nicoletti, who would have been here today, but he's out of town, but he's the one that provided the PowerPoint and said, thank you for helping us educate homeowners. He's very upfront. I would contact Mr. Nicoletti, and then you would be able to get, that answer. Yes, sir. So,
He has a question.
well, he asked earlier, and I haven't answered the question.
I was just wondering about the pamphlets because I got it late. I mean, they
Yeah.
all over.
Yeah, we asked for.
I mean, how do you come to a meeting like this? You don't have the vital information that people need, to call people. I mean, I don't know how many pamphlets you have, but from what I've seen, a lot of people.
Well, we had 2 RSVPs, and I made 50 pamphlets, thinking, if 10 people show up, I'll have enough. But we did say in the very beginning that if you give us your email, I can send you the PDF of it. I can give you mine in my hand, or I can go make copies. I'm happy to do that. Yeah. Okay.
Another question.
Hang on a second. Yes. Let me finish the slides real quick because I want to make sure I go through all these. Just a reminder: available exemptions, general homestead, senior assessment freeze, disabled person, disabled veteran, and returning veterans. Those are the exemptions, basically that you may or may not qualify. Everybody in this room ought to qualify for the general homestead. If you haven't, then you must have just purchased your home this last year and you didn't live in it on January 1st. That would be the only exception. Yes. Yeah, but I would just double check with your assessor to make sure that they realize that you bought the home, that now you live there. Make sure that kicks in. Okay? Let me just make sure. The tax distribution, again, it's sort of hard to see back there. And I'm colorblind, so I don't see all the different colors necessarily the way you do, but I see the differences. But you can see that county, fire district, forest preserve, the junior college, library, townships, township road districts, school districts, those are the different taxing bodies that do the levy. Remember we talked about the levy? All those different taxing bodies do a levy, which then impacts the tax rates. So that's sort of what that pie chart looks like.